And what we've taken away from this particular exhibition and the narrative that we've attempted to, I think in some way develop, is a transition. This has been, even when Armistice is declared on the 11th of November, it takes a long time before peace finally arrives. In part because it was a messy war. All wars are messy. And signatures on a piece of paper do not necessarily bring immediate peace.
And we're losing a generation at the moment of people who will have been alive to have seen all this play out, in particular the end of the war, who will be able to recount stories and will also be able to commemorate these events. They're not going to be around or aren't around anymore. So is it incumbent on the current generations to keep that alive?
I know history is a subject in schools, and we all take, many of us have taken either a GCSE and A-level or degrees in history. But the cyclical nature of history, the way that history will always impact in the present, is something that we do need to be reflexive about. You know, Foucault's Pendulum, that famous book by Umberto Eco, it's very true. History is a pendulum and it will revisit. I hope in some way that the exhibition and clearly the commemorations that are taking place across Europe are in some way a remembrance of a past that should not be revisited.
What can we see at this exhibition, and how will it perhaps differ from the ones you've been holding the last 4 years?
The exhibition, as it stands now, the narrative follows the transition, follows the long-awaited for peace, how it happened, how it was and wasn't announced in the press. So we've used items from our collection, newsprint, any pictorials that were published at the time or just after, to understand how this process was reported upon. So, for example, Punch, a very satirical periodical of the time, is very reluctant to say much about Armistice because the road towards peace was so fractious, was so negotiated, that even then nobody was sure if peace was actually going to be achieved. The Gibraltar Chronicle, what we've discovered, and this I thought was a bit of a scoop, maybe not, but at least for our exhibition, the Times doesn't declare armistice until the 12th of November, but the Gibraltar Chronicle on the 11th of November. The minute that the telegram is received by the governor, well then it's immediately announced in the Gibraltar Chronicle. So that I think is important, that the Chronicle leads on this, at least for Gibraltar.
And this may be a bit of a loaded question, but we're 100 years removed from the Great War, the end of the First World War. You yourself a historian in charge of the Garrison Library here. So how do you feel that we are doing now as a society? Where are we now with a lot of the politics and the world leaders in place right now, and the sense of feeling amongst a lot of people nowadays? How do you feel about where we've come to now?
Very close to the brink, I'd say. I don't want to be a warmonger in any shape or form, but I mentioned earlier the pendulum of history that keeps on reverberating. And I read an article not very long ago that at the beginning of every century, you have a period of unrest. And I wonder if maybe we are now revisiting this historic period of unrest and then things will settle down. But the world in which we live today is a complicated world, with very complex leaders, and I don't know what to add, but it looks very close to the brink at the moment.